A poor Apache woman saved a rancher without knowing he was the owner of the largest ranch. The sun hung low over the jagged mountains, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. The wind whispered across the dry plains, rustling the sparse grass and carrying the faint smell of smoke from distant campfires. On the edge of the Apache reservation, a woman walked steadily, her worn boots crunching against the rocky path. Her name was Lila, a young Apache woman whose life had been shaped by hardship, loss, and resilience. Every step she took carried the weight of responsibility. She cared for her younger siblings and helped her mother with the small household chores that barely kept them afloat. Despite the struggles, Lila's spirit was strong, her heart generous, and her determination unwavering. On that particular afternoon, she was gathering firewood near a narrow dirt road that cut through the mountains. The work was not easy. The wood was heavy, the path treacherous, and the sun unforgiving. Yet Lila moved with quiet purpose, humming a soft tune her grandmother had taught her. She had been so focused on her task that she almost didn't notice the vehicle struggling along the rugged path. At first, she thought it was a truck, but it sounded as if it were straining to move, tires spinning and scraping over the rocks. Curiosity piqued. She paused and watched from behind a boulder. The truck had become lodged in a shallow ditch, the front wheels spinning uselessly in loose dirt and gravel. A man was struggling to push it free, sweat streaming down his face, his hands scraping against the rough metal. He looked exhausted, frustrated, and very much in need of help. Lila's first instinct was caution. Strangers in these parts could bring trouble. But as she observed him, she noticed something in his posture that softened her caution, a mix of desperation and honesty that seemed to speak of someone genuinely in need. Without overthinking, she approached him slowly. "Do you need help?" she called out. Her voice was gentle but carried across the quiet valley. The man looked up, startled, his tired eyes meeting hers. Relief washed over his face, but he hesitated, as if unsure whether to trust a stranger. Then he nodded. "Yes, please," he said, his voice hoarse. "I've been stuck here for hours." She walked closer, careful not to startle him, and assessed the situation. The ditch wasn't too deep, but the truck was heavy, and alone, it would be almost impossible to free it. "I can try to help," she said, rolling up her sleeves. The man glanced at her hands, roughened from hard work, and gave a small, grateful smile. Together they worked in silence, lifting, pushing, and digging out the dirt under the tires. The sun was beating down on them, but Lila did not complain. She felt a strange sense of purpose in helping this man, even though she had no idea who he was. After several minutes of effort, the truck finally lurched free and slid back onto the path. The man leaned against the hood, breathing heavily, and laughed softly, a sound of relief that was almost childlike. "Thank you," he said, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Lila shrugged, a little embarrassed by the praise. "It was nothing," she said simply. "I'm just glad you're okay." She glanced at the truck, noting that it would probably still have trouble reaching the next town given the rugged terrain. "Do you need a place to rest?" "There's a small cabin nearby," she offered, almost without thinking. The man looked at her, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. I don't want to impose," he said. "You're not imposing," Lila replied firmly. "Come on, it's just a little ways from here. You can rest, have some water, and eat something." He hesitated again, but the exhaustion in his eyes was undeniable. Finally, he agreed. "All right," he said. "Thank you. I really appreciate it." Lila led him along a narrow path that wound through the rocks and cacti, the uneven ground forcing careful steps. The man stumbled occasionally, and she reached out to steady him, her hands firm and steady. She noticed how thin and worn his clothes were, how tired he seemed, and her heart ached for him. Whatever his story, she knew one thing. He needed help, and she would provide it. No questions asked. When they reached the cabin, Lila opened the door and ushered him inside. It was a modest place, built from wood and stone, with a small hearth and a few pieces of simple furniture. The smell of dried herbs and wood smoke filled the air, comforting and warm. "Sit down," she said, motioning to a worn chair near the fireplace. She went to fetch water from a jug in the corner and returned with a bowl of fresh water and a piece of bread she had saved from earlier. The man accepted the offerings gratefully, drinking deeply and breaking the bread with careful hands. "You're very kind," he said quietly, almost to himself. Lila smiled, brushing off the compliment. "I know what it's like to struggle," she said softly. "Everyone needs a little help sometimes." There was a pause as they sat in silence, the weight of the day settling around them. Then the man spoke again, his voice low and thoughtful. "I don't even know your name," he said. "Leela," she replied. "And you?" "John," he said. "John Morgan." Leela nodded, filing the name away but not prying further. She could see that he was proud, private, and perhaps not used to accepting help. That made her even more determined to offer it without judgment or expectation. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, shadows stretched across the cabin walls. Leela built a small fire in the hearth, the flames crackling and casting warm light over the room. She could see John relaxing slightly, his tense shoulders loosening, and she felt a quiet satisfaction. Helping someone, especially someone who seemed so burdened by circumstances, gave her a sense of purpose she cherished deeply. Dinner was simple: more bread, some beans she had saved, and a few dried fruits. They ate quietly, exchanging small stories about the land, the weather, and life in general. Lila spoke of her family, her siblings, and the challenges they faced, while John shared only fragments of his life, careful not to reveal too much. Yet, even in those small exchanges, a bond began to form, built on trust, respect, and the shared human experience of struggle. After dinner, Lila offered him a blanket and a place to sleep near the hearth. John hesitated, then accepted, lying down with a grateful nod. Lila watched him for a moment, a thought forming in her mind. People are often more than they appear. This man, tired, weary, and struggling, was kind, humble, and sincere, even if he had not yet shown all of himself. That night, as the fire crackled and the wind whispered through the cracks in the cabin walls, Lila sat by the window, staring at the star-studded sky. She reflected on the day's events, feeling a mixture of pride and curiosity. She had helped a stranger without expecting anything in return, simply because it was the right thing to do. And though she didn't know it yet, this simple act of kindness would change both of their lives in ways she could never have imagined. Meanwhile, John lay under the blankets staring at the rough wooden ceiling. He thought about the young woman who had saved him, not just from the ditch, but from exhaustion, fear, and loneliness. Her courage and selflessness struck him profoundly. He had traveled many roads, met many people, but few had ever shown such genuine care without expectation. A part of him wished he could tell her the truth about who he was, but for now he remained silent, wanting to see her character shine without the shadow of his wealth or status. The night deepened, quiet except for the occasional rustle of the wind through the canyon. Lila eventually drifted off to sleep, weary but satisfied, unaware that the man she had helped was far more than he appeared to be. For John, sleep did not come easily. He thought of Lila's courage, her generosity, and the stark contrast between her life and his own. He wondered how fate had brought them together, and whether the kindness of one person could ripple into something much greater. Morning came slowly, golden light spilling into the cabin. Lila stirred first, preparing a small breakfast of bread and tea. She moved quietly so as not to wake John immediately, though she glanced over and saw him stirring under the blanket. A smile touched her lips. Despite their differences, they had found a small connection in that little cabin, a connection built on empathy, courage, and the simplest, purest act of human kindness. As the day began, Lila had no idea what the future held, nor did she know the true identity of the man she had helped. But something deep inside her told her that their meeting was not by chance. She had saved a life, but she had also opened the door to a story much larger than herself, a story that would test hearts, challenge assumptions, and ultimately reveal the profound power of courage and compassion. And so, with the first light of dawn shining on the mountains, Lila and John began a journey together, not yet knowing the twists and turns ahead, but bound by a shared human truth, that sometimes a simple act of kindness can change the course of a life forever. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the mountains, spilling golden light across the rugged plains. Lila moved quietly around the cabin, her hands busy with chores. She carried water from a nearby stream, swept the floor, and prepared a small breakfast. Despite the early hour, her mind was restless. She kept thinking about John, the man she had helped, and the strange sense of calm he seemed to carry despite his obvious exhaustion. There was something different about him, something quiet yet powerful, and she could not help but be curious about his life. John had stayed up longer than Lila expected. While she slept, he had been gazing out of the small window, studying the mountains, the streams, and the endless sky. He could not shake the feeling that fate had led him here, to a modest cabin in the middle of nowhere, cared for by a woman he barely knew. It was humbling, uncomfortable even, and yet comforting at the same time. He had been used to people looking at him differently. Wealth, power, or influence often colored the way they saw him. But Lila treated him like any other person, like someone who mattered simply because he was human. By the time Lila returned to the room with breakfast, John was awake, sitting near the hearth with his hands folded. He offered a small smile as she approached. "Good morning," he said softly. "Morning," Lila replied, setting down a plate with bread and tea. "You slept well, I hope?" "As well as I can," John said, his eyes scanning the cabin as if seeing it for the first time in the daylight. "This place, it's simple, but it feels peaceful." Lila shrugged. "It's home, not fancy, but it's ours." She poured tea into a small cup and handed it to him. "Eat. You need your strength if you're going to travel again today." John nodded, taking the cup. He sipped carefully, savoring the warmth and quiet. "I can't thank you enough," he said. "You saved me yesterday. Honestly, I don't know what I would have done without your help." "It's nothing," Lila said quickly, though a small blush rose to her cheeks. I don't like seeing people suffer when I can do something to help." There was a pause, comfortable yet filled with unspoken thoughts. John studied her face, noticing the determination in her eyes, the lines of responsibility etched softly on her features. He could see that her life had not been easy, that she carried burdens heavier than most could imagine, and yet she faced them with courage, humility, and kindness. "I wish I had met someone like you sooner," he said quietly, almost to himself. Lila looked up, startled. "Someone like me?" "Yes," John said, a faint smile touching his lips. "Someone who cares. Someone who acts without thinking of reward. Someone real." Lila turned her attention to her tea, stirring slowly, unsure how to respond. She had never expected to hear such words from a stranger. Her life had been full of hardship and struggle, and praise was something she rarely received. Yet hearing it now, spoken with sincerity, touched something deep within her. After breakfast, they stepped outside. The day was bright, the air crisp and clean. Lila decided to show John the nearby stream, a place where she often went to fetch water or simply think. As they walked, John noticed her confidence and ease with the land. She moved as if she belonged entirely to the mountains, every step sure and deliberate, every gesture natural. He found himself admiring not just her courage, but her connection to the world around her. By the stream, Lila knelt and dipped a small metal cup into the flowing water, offering it to John. "Drink. It's fresh and clean," she said. "Ha ha 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 ha." John took the cup, marveling at the simplicity and purity of the water. "This is incredible," he said. "Where I come from, people pay a lot for water that isn't even this good." Lila laughed softly. "You have to appreciate what's around you. People here don't have much, but we make the most of it." They sat together on the smooth rocks by the stream, their legs dangling over the edge. The sound of flowing water filled the silence, and the warmth of the sun touched their faces. For a while they said little, content simply to be in each other's presence. It was a peaceful, grounding moment, one that neither of them had realized they needed. After some time, Lila began to speak again. "I work hard every day," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Sometimes it feels like the world doesn't care about people like us. But I try to keep going, for my family, for myself. I can't sit and wait for someone else to fix things." John listened carefully, impressed by her resilience. "You have more strength than most people I know," he said honestly. "It's rare to meet someone who faces life so directly, without complaining, without asking for anything in return." Lila shrugged again, a small smile on her face. "It's not about being strong. It's about surviving, doing what you have to do. That's life, isn't it?" John nodded, feeling a mix of admiration and humility. He realized that despite his wealth and influence back home, he had never faced true hardship the way she had. She had lived through struggle and emerged with her heart intact, something far more valuable than any riches he could possess. As the day wore on, a storm began to form over the mountains. Dark clouds rolled in, and the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and earth. Lila noticed the change and turned to John. "We should head back before the storm gets worse," she said. They hurried along the path, the wind tugging at their clothes and hair. The first drops of rain began to fall, and soon it became a steady drizzle. By the time they reached the cabin, both were soaked but laughing at the sheer force of nature. Inside, Lila started a small fire to warm them, and John watched, feeling a sense of comfort he had not experienced in years. As the storm raged outside, they talked more freely. John shared small stories of his travels, his life on the road, and the challenges he had faced. Lila listened, offering advice, asking questions, and sharing her own experiences. Their conversation was easy, natural, and honest, a rare connection that neither of them had expected to find. Later, John helped Lila with chores around the cabin. He carried firewood, swept the floor, and even tried to cook a simple meal. Though clumsy, his efforts made Lila laugh, and she found herself enjoying his company more than she had anticipated. For John, the experience was humbling and grounding. Here, in the middle of nowhere, stripped of titles, money, and influence, he was simply a man, and she treated him with the kindness and respect that he had long forgotten existed. As night fell, the storm subsided, leaving the world fresh and cool. Lila and John sat by the hearth, sipping tea and listening to the wind rustle the trees outside. The quiet moments between them were filled with unspoken understanding and growing respect. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," John said softly, his gaze fixed on the fire. "But I know I wouldn't have made it here without you." "You would have found your way," Lila replied, her voice calm. "But I'm glad I could help." They sat in silence for a while, both lost in thought. The bond that had formed in a single day was deeper than either expected. It was built not on wealth, status, or appearance, but on courage, trust, and genuine human connection. As John prepared to settle for the night, he looked at Lila and felt a strange mixture of admiration, gratitude, and something he could not quite name. She had shown him a kindness he had almost forgotten existed, and in return, he felt a responsibility, not just to thank her, but to honor the trust she had placed in him. For Lila, the day had been exhausting but fulfilling. She had helped someone in need, faced a storm, and discovered that even in the harshest circumstances, connection and kindness could thrive. As she lay down to sleep, she thought about the man she had saved. She did not yet know who he really was, but she sensed that their paths crossing had a reason beyond mere chance. Outside, the mountains stood tall and silent, the night calm and vast. In that quiet, both Lila and John drifted into sleep, unaware of the twists and turns that lay ahead, but bound together by the small, powerful acts of courage, trust, and kindness that had brought them to this moment. The following day would bring new challenges, testing their patience, endurance, and understanding of one another. But for now, in the safety of the cabin, with the storm behind them and the warmth of the fire around them, a quiet bond had formed, one that would grow stronger as they faced the world together, step by step, day by day. And so, the story of two lives, seemingly worlds apart, continued to unfold, bound by fate, courage, and the simple truth that true kindness can bridge any divide. The morning sun filtered softly through the cabin window, casting a warm glow over the small room. Lila stirred awake, stretching and yawning as she glanced over at John, who was already awake and staring thoughtfully out of the window. He didn't speak at first, as if he was gathering his thoughts, but Lila noticed the unusual calm in his demeanor. Something had shifted overnight, something in the way he carried himself, quiet and serious, yet strangely at peace. She got up and began her morning chores, moving with practiced efficiency. She fed the small animals near the cabin, swept the floor, and refilled the water jug. John remained seated near the window, quietly observing her. There was something about Lila's presence that commanded respect without demanding it. Every action she took, no matter how small, seemed filled with purpose and care. It was a rare sight in his world, where wealth and influence often masked the real measure of a person. After breakfast, as Lila washed the dishes, John finally spoke. "Lila," he said, his voice calm but firm, "there's something I need to tell you." She paused, wiping her hands on a cloth. "What is it?" she asked, sensing a serious tone in his voice. He took a deep breath and looked directly at her, his eyes steady. "The truth is, I'm not just a traveler or someone passing through. I own a ranch, a very large ranch." He hesitated, watching her reaction closely. "It's the largest in the state. I didn't tell you before because I wanted you to see me for who I am, not for what I own." For a moment, Lila's hands froze on the dish she had been cleaning. She stared at him, unsure whether to believe him. Then she slowly set the dish down and looked him in the eyes. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, quietly. "Why hide something like that?" John's expression softened. "Because I wanted to know who you are, not who I am. I wanted to see your character without any influence of wealth, status, or fear. I wanted to know the real you." Lila felt a mix of emotions: surprise, confusion, and a twinge of doubt. Part of her wondered if her actions had been different had she known the truth, but she quickly pushed the thought away. She had helped him because it was right, not because she expected anything in return. She had acted out of kindness and compassion, qualities that she valued above all else. I don't know what to say," she admitted softly. "I helped you because it was the right thing to do. Your money, your land, none of that mattered to me." John smiled, relief and admiration shining in his eyes. "That's exactly why I wanted to meet you. You've shown me what it truly means to be brave and selfless. You've shown me a side of humanity that I had almost forgotten existed." For a long moment they sat in silence, both absorbing the weight of the revelation. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of wild flowers and fresh earth. Lila felt a strange sense of calm, realizing that her instincts had been correct. Kindness and courage mattered far more than wealth or status. Finally, she spoke again. "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity. John looked at her thoughtfully. "I want to help you," he said simply. "Not just because you helped me, but because I believe in your strength and character. I want to give you opportunities to make life easier for you and your family, if you'll let me." Lila's eyes widened slightly. She had never imagined such an offer. Life had always been a struggle, and she had learned to rely on herself and her family alone. The idea of accepting help, especially from someone so wealthy, felt strange. But she could also see the sincerity in John's eyes. He was not offering charity. He was offering respect and choice. I need time to think," she said honestly. I have responsibilities. I need to make sure I do what's right for my family and for me." John nodded. "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need. I'm not asking for anything in return. I just want to offer you the chance to make life a little better if you want it." Over the next few days, John stayed at the cabin, helping Lila with chores, gathering firewood, and even assisting her with repairs around the small property. Despite his wealth and experience managing a massive ranch, he moved with humility and care, never taking over, never undermining her efforts. Instead, he worked beside her, quietly earning her trust and admiration. Lila found herself observing him more closely. He was patient, gentle, and surprisingly practical. He knew how to fix things, tend to animals, and manage the land with skill and respect. But it wasn't just his abilities that impressed her. It was his attitude, his willingness to learn from her, and his genuine respect for her knowledge and experience. One afternoon, as they worked together in the small garden behind the cabin, Lila noticed John pause and look around, taking in the modest surroundings. "You live a simple life," he said softly, "but I can see the strength it takes to make it work. I can see the heart in everything you do." Lila smiled faintly, wiping her brow. "Simple, yes, but life is not easy. We don't have much, but we make it work. We have to." John nodded, watching her carefully. "And you do it with courage and dignity." That's something money could never buy. The compliment made Lila pause, a small blush rising to her cheeks. She looked down at her hands, roughened from work, and then back at him. "I'm just doing my best," she said quietly. "That's more than most people do," John replied, a small, genuine smile on his lips. "It's rare to meet someone like you. Rare to see someone so strong, so giving, without expecting anything in return." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the cabin, they sat together outside, watching the sky change colors. The air was calm, and the world felt still. Lila reflected on the past few days, realizing how much she had come to trust and respect John. He had entered her life unexpectedly, yet he had become someone she could rely on, someone who had proven that kindness and humility could exist even in a world full of challenges. John, for his part, felt a growing sense of admiration and gratitude for Lila. Her courage and compassion had saved him not just physically, but emotionally. She had reminded him of the simple human truths he had almost forgotten in his life of wealth and responsibility. He knew that helping her was more than a gesture of repayment. It was a chance to honor the remarkable person she was. As night fell, the cabin glowed softly with the light from the hearth. Lila prepared a simple meal and they ate quietly, savoring the comfort of food, warmth, and companionship. Outside, the stars twinkled in the clear sky, and the wind carried the faint scent of pine and earth. After dinner, they sat together in silence, listening to the quiet sounds of the night. Lila felt a deep sense of peace, realizing that despite the hardships she had faced, she had found someone who valued her for who she was, not for what she could provide. John felt a similar sense of awe and respect, knowing that he had met someone extraordinary, someone whose strength, kindness, and courage could not be measured by wealth or power. Finally, John spoke again. "Lila," he said softly, "I know this may be sudden, but I want you to know you've changed my life. Your courage, your kindness, it's shown me what really matters, and I want to do everything I can to help you and your family if you'll let me." Lila looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of surprise, hesitation, and cautious hope. She knew accepting his help would change her life, but she also knew it could open doors for her family, opportunities she had only dreamed of. Yet, she wanted to make sure her choice was her own, not influenced by gratitude or fear. I need to think carefully," she said, her voice steady but thoughtful. "I can't just decide right away. I have responsibilities, and I need to make sure I do what's right." "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'm not asking for anything. I just want to offer the chance. And whatever you decide, I will respect it." That night, Lila lay awake by the small fire, thinking about the man who had come into her life so unexpectedly. She thought about his honesty, humility, and kindness. She thought about the difference he had made in just a few days, and she realized that trust and connection were far more valuable than anything else, more valuable than fear, doubt, or pride. Outside, the wind whispered through the mountains, carrying the promise of new beginnings. For Lila and John, the journey was far from over, but a bridge had been built between them, a bridge of trust, respect, and the simple truth that courage and kindness could change lives in ways neither had imagined. And so, as the stars shone over the rugged landscape, both of them drifted into a quiet sleep, hearts full of hope, minds full of questions, and spirits ready to face the next chapter of their journey together, one that would challenge them, inspire them, and ultimately bring the truth into the light. The morning light crept gently across the cabin, illuminating the small wooden room where Lila had spent countless hours preparing for the day. Today, however, felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, a mixture of anticipation and reflection. Lila moved about her chores with careful thought, her mind turning over the past few days. She had helped a man in need, shared meals, faced storms, and worked side by side with someone whose presence had quietly changed the rhythm of her life. Yet she still wrestled with the decision that awaited her. Should she accept the opportunity John had offered, or continue on the path she had always known? John sat by the window, the soft morning light casting shadows across his face. He had spent the night thinking too, considering the gravity of the moment. His offer had not been just about helping a person. It was about trust, respect, and recognizing a life shaped by courage, and determination. He understood the weight of what he had asked. Accepting his help could change everything for Leela and her family. Yet he had no doubts about one thing. She deserved every chance to live a better, safer, and more fulfilling life. After breakfast, they stepped outside together. The mountains stretched endlessly in the distance, their peaks sharp and majestic, bathed in golden sunlight. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. Lila looked at John, her heart steady, but her mind full of questions. She wanted to understand the man who had revealed so much about himself, yet remained humble and kind. "I've been thinking," she said slowly, her voice quiet but determined, "about your offer and what it could mean for my family, and for me." She paused, studying his expression. "I've never had anyone offer me something like this before. Someone trusting me, giving me a choice without pressure. It's not easy to decide." John nodded. "I understand," he said, "and you don't have to decide right away. But I want this to be your choice, entirely. Nothing you do should feel like it's because of me or anything I can give. It should be because it's right for you." Lila looked at him, noticing the sincerity in his eyes, the quiet patience that matched the strength she had come to admire. "I need to think carefully," she repeated. "I can't just say yes because it sounds good or because I'm grateful. I have responsibilities, and I need to be sure I'm doing the right thing." John smiled softly. "Take all the time you need. I'll respect whatever decision you make." Over the next few days, they continued their routine, chopping wood, tending to the small garden, fixing the cabin, and sharing meals. Each task, each conversation strengthened the trust and understanding between them. John learned more about Lila's life, her family, and the challenges they faced daily. Lila learned that John was not just a man of wealth, but a man of integrity, humility, and genuine care. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a broken fence near the edge of the property, Lila paused, wiping sweat from her brow. She looked out across the mountains, breathing in the crisp air. "I never thought my life could be like this," she said softly. "Simple, hard, yes, but peaceful. And yet, when I think about the future, I wonder if I'm ready to change everything." John listened quietly, understanding her hesitation. "Change is not always easy," he said, "but sometimes it can bring the chance for a better life, not just for you, but for those you love. And you deserve that, Lila." She smiled faintly, feeling the weight of his words. They were gentle, yet carried truth she could not ignore. She knew that her life so far had been shaped by necessity and survival, but she also realized that strength and courage could open doors to something greater if one dared to step through. That evening they sat by the hearth, the fire crackling warmly, shadows dancing across the walls. Lila made a decision, quiet but firm. "John," she said, looking into his eyes, "I've thought about it. I want to accept your offer, but in a way that lets me keep my independence. I don't want to be dependent on anyone, but I also want to make life better for my family. If that's possible, I would like your help." John's eyes lit up with relief and gratitude. "Leela, that's exactly what I hoped you would say," he said softly. "I promise you will have the freedom to make your own choices, and nothing will be done without your approval. This is about supporting you and your family, not controlling your life." The following days were filled with careful planning. John introduced her to ways she could use resources to improve her home and provide for her family. Together, they repaired the cabin, planted a larger garden, and even arranged for supplies to help her younger siblings attend school. Lila worked alongside John, her hands busy but her heart full. She realized that accepting help did not make her weak. It allowed her courage and determination to reach further than she could alone. Word of her bravery and kindness began to spread through the local community. Neighbors who had once only known Lila for her quiet strength now admired her resilience, and some sought her advice or help with their own struggles. She became a symbol of courage and hope, someone who faced life's difficulties with honesty, humility, and heart. John watched quietly as Lila flourished. He realized that her influence extended far beyond the small cabin. They were creating ripples of change that touched many lives. And while he had come to offer support, he found himself learning from her in return. Lila had taught him the value of simplicity, the power of courage, and the true meaning of generosity. One morning, as they stood at the edge of the repaired fence, looking out across the mountains, John spoke softly, "You've done something incredible, Lila. Not just for me, or even for your family, but for everyone around you. Your courage and kindness, it's rare." Lila smiled, her eyes reflecting both pride and humility. "I didn't do it for praise," she said. "I did it because it was right. That's all anyone can do. Try to do what's right with the life they have." John nodded, understanding completely. "And that's why you inspire people," he said. "You act from your heart without expectation. That's something I've learned from you, and I will never forget it." The day passed peacefully, with small moments of laughter and quiet reflection. Lila tended to the garden, while John helped with repairs and shared stories of the ranch, careful not to overwhelm her with details of wealth or status. Their companionship was grounded in mutual respect, trust, and the understanding that their bond was built on far more than circumstance. It was built on the simple human values of courage, kindness, and integrity. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of pink and gold, Lila sat on the porch steps, her younger siblings playing nearby. She felt a sense of fulfillment and calm she had never known. Her life had changed, yes, but it was not just the material improvements. It was the realization that kindness, courage, and trust could transform even the simplest life into something extraordinary. John joined her on the steps, sitting quietly beside her. He did not speak at first, simply observing the peaceful scene before them. The children laughing, the garden thriving, the mountains standing tall in the distance. It was a moment of perfect stillness, a reward for the trials they had faced together. Finally, John broke the silence. "I want you to know," he said softly, "this is only the beginning. There will be challenges, yes, but you are stronger than you know, and I will always respect your choices, support your dreams, and admire the person you are." Lila looked at him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she said simply. "For everything, not just for what you've done, but for seeing me, really seeing me." John smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "It was easy to see," he said, "because you are remarkable, Lila. You always have been." As night fell, the cabin glowed softly from the firelight, the mountains standing tall and silent under the starry sky. Lila knew that her life had changed forever, not because of wealth or status, but because of trust, courage, and the quiet power of human kindness. She had saved a man who was more than he seemed, and in return she had been given a choice, a future, and a reminder that life's true value lies in character, heart, and action. For John, the journey had been equally transformative. He had entered Lila's life expecting only to receive help, but he found himself profoundly humbled, inspired, and forever changed by her strength and generosity. Together they had created something rare and beautiful, a bond built on respect, trust, and the understanding that true greatness is measured not by wealth or power, but by the courage to act from the heart. And so, as the stars sparkled above the mountains and the night wrapped the world in quiet peace, Lila and John sat together on the porch, watching the future stretch out before them. Life would bring more challenges, yes, but they would face them with courage, kindness, and the quiet understanding that one small act of bravery could change everything, forever. The cabin, the mountains, and the lives they touched stood as a testament to the power of trust, generosity, and the human spirit. Lila had been humble, brave, and kind. John had been wise, patient, and generous. Together they had proven that life's true treasures are found not in wealth, but in character, in connection, and in the courage to act with a full and open heart. And in that quiet, star-filled night, both knew that the story they had begun together was only the beginning of a life full of hope, respect, and endless possibilities.